Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name's Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Paul Cottier. We're honoured to acknowledge Ms Gabrielle Luzgruk-Muller, Parliamentary State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs, Germany, and the accompanying delegation. Commodore David Greaves, Acting Deputy Chief of Navy, Royal Australian Naval Reserve. Mr John King, President, ACT Branch, Returned and Services League of Australia, and Mr Alex McGowan, representing the President of the Naval Association of Australia, Australian Capital Territory Section. Also members of the Cumberland RSL sub-branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony around Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, St Clair Public School, and from Victoria, Concord School, Bundora, and Christchurch Grammar School, South Yarra. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The all-naval catapult party will now dismount from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. I invite you to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, you may be seated. I'd now like to invite Commander Cottier to the lectern to say a few words in regard to the Battle of the Coral Sea.
Today marks the 75th anniversary of the beginning of the Battle of the Coral Sea. Fought from the 4th to the 8th of May 1942, it was a pivotal action in the Pacific War. Although the battle itself consisted largely of a duel between Japanese and Australian aircraft carriers, two Australian warships, HMAS Australia and HMAS Hobart, were with the American-led fleet and helped fend off attacks by Japanese aircraft. Two Royal Australian Air Force Catalina flying boats were also lost over the Coral Sea on the 4th of May, shot down by Japanese aircraft. The Japanese and American navies each lost one aircraft carrier during the fighting, but ultimately the Japanese fleet withdrew. A Japanese invasion flotilla bound for Port Moresby also turned back after being deprived of carrier-based air support. The Battle of the Coral Sea broke a sequence of seemingly unstoppable Japanese conquests in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. American General Douglas MacArthur said that the Allied victory in the Coral Sea undoubtedly saved Australia from a definite and immediate threat. While this might have been an overstatement, it is true that if Port Moresby had fallen to the Japanese, it would have strengthened their hold on New Guinea and further isolated the Australian mainland. It is also likely that enemy air raids along the Queensland coast would have become commonplace. The battle was not only the first aircraft carrier battle, but also the first sea battle in which opposing capital ships did not fire at or even see one another. In fact, the main fleets did not come within 100 kilometres of each other. These actions foreshadowed the epic aircraft carrier battle at Midway the following month. Defeating the Coral Sea, the Japanese forces now attempted to seize Port Moresby by the overland route. This led to the iconic events of the Kokoda Trail campaign, fought from July to November 1942. The Battle of the Coral Sea has also come to symbolise the enduring alliance and close friendship between Australia and the United States, as both nations were united in the same purpose, defending our shared values and beliefs. This evening we remember and pay tribute to Supply Assistant David John Wollstonecroft, Royal Australian Navy, who made the ultimate sacrifice during an earlier Australian-American naval action against the Japanese, the Battle of the Java Sea in March 1942.
Thank you, Commander Cottier. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we pay tribute to Supply Assistant David John Wollstonecroft, who was killed on active service with the Royal Australian Navy during the Second World War. Born in Warragul, Victoria, on the 25th of January 1922, David Wollstonecroft was the son of Bernard Woodall Wollstonecroft and Isabel Selby Wollstonecroft. He was the eldest of 5 siblings. The family lived in Newport in Melbourne's west. As a young boy, David attended Neerim South State School, Newgee State School, and Mordialloc High School. During the Second World War, 4 members of the Wollstonecroft family served their nation. The father, Bernard, a veteran of the First World War, enlisted again and served as a paymaster in Melbourne, holding the rank of Staff Sergeant. His 3 eldest children also served: David in the Royal Australian Navy, Bernard in the Royal Australian Air Force, and Joan in the Women's Auxiliary Australian Air Force. David Wollstonecroft enlisted in the Royal Australian Navy in March 1939, only months before the outbreak of war. In November 1939, he joined the crew of the sloop HMAS Yarra, which was posted to the port of Aden in August 1940 to join the Red Sea Force. Over the next year, the ship took part in patrols in the Indian Ocean and in the Persian Gulf. In November 1941, HMAS Yarra was in the Mediterranean, helping to escort convoys bringing supplies to the besieged garrison at Tobruk. Following the outbreak of war in the Pacific in December 1941, Yarra returned from the Mediterranean. The ship was sent to Java for escort duties between Batavia and Singapore. And in February 1942, it was involved in a rescue of 1,800 survivors from the troop ship Empress of Asia, which was sunk by Japanese dive bombers near Singapore. On the 4th of March, the Yarra was escorting a small convoy of 3 merchant ships from Java to Fremantle, which was intercepted by 5 Japanese warships, 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers. Yarra's commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Robert Rankin, dispersed the convoy and turned Yarra towards the Japanese warships in an attempt to place the small sloop between the enemy and the merchant ships. Though outgunned and outranged, Yarra laid down a smokescreen and began its attack. The Japanese warships swiftly overwhelmed and sank the 3 merchant ships, while inflicting devastating damage on Yarra. Shortly before being killed by a direct salvo to the bridge, Rankin gave the order to abandon ship. Burning fiercely and with its engines room and steering destroyed, Yarra was listing heavily and sinking at the stern. Acting leading seaman Ronald Buck Taylor manned Yarra's remaining gun and continued to fire until he was killed. His actions were credited by survivors for allowing them to gain the relative safety of the life rafts and Carley floats. Shortly after, Yarra slipped beneath the waves. Of the 151 crew, 138 were killed in the attack or later died on life rafts. David Wollstonecroft was among those killed. He was 20 years old. Able seaman Joseph F. Murphy of the Royal New Zealand Navy, who had been taken prisoner following the sinking of HMS Stronghold on the 2nd of March, witnessed the sinking of Yarra from the deck of the Japanese cruiser Maya. He remembered. Silently we stood and watched that little sloop. White ensign flying and all guns blazing against hopeless odds. Hers was a gallant death of which Australia should be very proud. In 2015, HMAS Yarra 2 was awarded a unit citation for gallantry, which reads in part, "For extraordinary gallantry in action off Singapore on the 5th of February 1942 and in the Indian Ocean on 4th of March 1942. The then Chief of Navy, Vice Admiral Ray Griggs, accepted the award on behalf of HMAS Yarra 2's crew, including David Wollstonecroft and their surviving family members. As part of his acceptance speech, he noted that collective gallantry is the most prized achievement in the Navy. A ship's crew are all one company. They go to sea together, go into action together, and we pray they come home together. Sadly, this was not to be the fate of Yarra. The names of those crew of the Yarra who died during this encounter are commemorated on the Plymouth Navy Memorial in Britain, which is dedicated to the thousands of British and Commonwealth sailors who lost their lives at sea or who have no known grave. Wollstonecroft was first reported missing, and his death was not officially confirmed until December. This was not the only tragedy to strike the Wollstonecroft family during the war. In March 1945, David's brother Bernard, a pilot in Bomber Command, was killed during an operation over Germany. David Wollstonecroft's name is listed here on the Roll of Honour on my left, among some 40,000 others who died while serving in the Second World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Supply Assistant David John Wollstonecroft, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Party shoulder.
They have no grave but the cruel sea, no flowers lay at their head. A roasting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
That whole party presents.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Party count. Love. Turn. Quick. Ah.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you a very good evening. Thank you.